Hafa day and welcome back to another episode of Coffee with the Candidates here at Anika Lounge at the Leo Palace Resort. I'm Rebecca Elmore with PNC's News First. Joining us today is Republican senatorial candidate Jose St. Augustin, and then joining us a little later is Republican incumbent Frank Boss Jr. But for now, we're going to take a quick break. Welcome back to Coffee with the Candidates. Joining me right now is Republican senatorial candidate Jose St. Augustin. Jose, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you very much.
So we'll start with the first question. Why are you running for office?
Well, thank you for that question. I thank you very much for having me here. Well, first of all, you know, I'm local. I was born in Guam, raised on Guam, and I left for 30 years. Back in 1979, I joined the Marine Corps. So every so often, you know, every other year I'll come home and I could see the growth of our island here and the movement that it's taken. So the entire time that I was in the military, of course, because I'm from home, I'm local, I'm roots, I miss home. And so to answer your question, what I wanted to do was come back and contribute, be part of the solution to help our community, help our island better, and ensure that generations to come will not have the same issues that we are now facing, but more so be part of the solution and lead them into a better Guam, if you may, for generations to come. And I'm talking generations to come, you know, our kids, grandkids, and so on and so on. And that's very important because we don't want to, you know, I'm one of those that just don't want to sit around and just let things happen. If I could be part of the solution to make things better, that's what I'm offering, and I could do that. I'm prepared for that.
Okay, moving on to current event issues. Number one, senatorial pay raises. Can you give us your opinion on the controversial or somewhat controversial senatorial pay raises?
Thank you for that. You know, we always hope that the people that we elect them to make sure that they do the right thing, and to make those very tough decisions, if you may. And they should be entrusted by the people who voted them, that when they make that decision, it's for the better of the people, better of the community, better for the future of the community and the people in itself. But because, from what I've been seeing since it was implemented, it's been very controversial. My position to it, and I'm speaking on my part, is that I think it was executed prematurely, but in my part I will say that I would offer to take back my senatorial pay raise, and I'll let the other senators speak on their part, but speaking from me, I will give my pay raise back if elected.
So do you think should the people be given the right to repeal the current salary via means of plebiscite?
Straightforward, I really think so, because of its controversy. This thing is not going to go away until there's a process that could settle it, and so that the satisfaction of the people actually making the decision is then met. But until then, I will be in favor that the people voice and be given that opportunity to vote for this particular controversy, and so that we could put it to rest and move forward to a lot of bigger, better things.
Okay, let's switch over to medicinal or recreational marijuana. First, medicinal. Are you for or against the implementation of medical marijuana?
Well, you know, there's still a lot of study, and of course, you know that they're still trying to refine and define the do's and don'ts and the law. I'll tell you, I am in favor of medicinal marijuana, and the reason behind that, if it's a last resort, and I'm hoping it's for last resort, that there's nothing else that there is in the market to be able to help these individuals that are very ill overcome the illness and the pain that they're going through. I foresee that the implementation of the medicinal marijuana was just that, to address those patients that are suffering from certain illness, as to kind of just take the pain away, but it's not so much a cure, but to take the pain away for those that are pretty much bedridden, and you know, there's no other medicine out there that could cure the pain that they're enduring, but the medicinal marijuana uh, does have that ingredient, and that's what I'm understanding. So I'm in favor of the medicinal marijuana. As far as the recreational marijuana, I disagree with that. Maybe down the road when they do more study and convince me why should it be recreational, but at this point, I think we're setting ourselves up for more illegal activities, if you may, to take place. Um, and I'll stop at that.
If you could author guidelines on how to regulate medicinal marijuana, how would you author that
Medicinal marijuana?
for medicinal
Okay,
marijuana?
very good. Well, as lawmakers, and I think what I like to do is really throw this back to the doctors because they're the ones that really know what it's designed for and how much of that ingredient each patient has to take. All right, because it depends. So what really needs to happen is that those kind of information should come from a doctor to lawmakers so that when it is then stated that each patient, depending on their condition, has to take a certain milligram or a certain amount, that's the amount that should be provided to that patient. Now, because the condition that it's being placed, a lot of restrictions have to be implemented for those that are possibly going to abuse it. So, an example, if the one patient is only allowed to take 2 milligrams and end up taking more than that, so that privileges should be restricted and taken away from that patient who's then abusing the doctor's orders. But from my standpoint, I think it'll be good to get those kind of information from a doctor, the professionals, so that I can make a better decision.
Thank you for sharing that. Let's now switch subjects to education. With the current status of Guam's educational system, what is your list of priorities to address if you're elected as senator?
You know, when I retired from the Marine Corps, what I wanted to do was come home and volunteer at the 3 schools that I went to, and that's the Maria Elementary, the Weddingale, Benevente Middle School, and the JFK. And I say 3 because JFK is a new school. But my intent was to volunteer because I just know how important volunteering is. And when you volunteer, what you do is you become now a solution to many of the issues that are happening in our school system. So I'll give you a case in point. Simon Sanchez, been there, I played soccer there in 1976. It's been very controversial because of the dilapidated state that it's in. GW, the same thing. It's a rather old school. So those are things that catches my attention that, why is it that we wait for the last minute when the school is dilapidating, unsafe, and then we shut down for a certain amount of days so we could repair. I think we should anticipate ahead of time during the summer to do those repairs or anticipate to start building new facilities within that school so that we do not slow or stop the education or school program that are taking place during school years. Did that answer your question? That's one. The other thing is the shortage of teachers. Very important because the teachers are the key to the kids at school getting their knowledge. So, what I want to do is figure out what's going on. Is it shortage because they're getting promoted or they're moving elsewhere or being transferred? So the solution to it is really look into it and do better recruitment than what we're doing now. We should not allow our kids to suffer because there's no school teacher available and the teacher's aide is there just to do whatever minimal. Minimal is not acceptable. Third, the funding. I think this year the Guam Education is short of funds, I think by several millions. 3 millions, don't quote me on that, but I think somewhere around there. Very important because if you want the kids to have good education,
Yes.
you want to be able to have the resources there. And if funding is the issue, then when I'm in there, I want to talk to my colleagues or whoever they are, and let's take a look at preventing these kind of things from happening because this is very common in Guam. So the mindset has to change. And if we want our kids to have better education, we got to work together and make sure the resources are there and not cut it short in the middle of the school year. That
Okay.
makes sense. Thank you.
Now, and is there anything else you'd like to share with the viewers about your platform or your position
As far as the education
as
is
far as
concerned,
running for senator?
well, there are actually 4 items on my platform, and those are very realistic. The first one is really our environment. The rhino beetle that destroyed our food source, the coconut. The second is island sustainability. I'm a farmer, and I'm still farming now. And even when I was in the Marine Corps, I was farming in the backyard, believe it or not. The reason why this is important, we have to work together and find a way to sustain ourselves food-wise, agriculture-wise, and not really depend on imports. Imports are going to happen, but we need to work hard and figure a way so that we could get our farmers to plant our local fruit and vegetables and livestock, so that we could sustain ourselves on island and not rely on imports. The fourth one is the veterans. That's the biggest thing. Because I joined the military, I'm now the administrator for the Guam Veterans Affairs. It hurts me to see Vietnam vets come to see me crying because they have lost trust and faith in the system. We also anticipate within 15, 20 years from now, and I'll mention this, I was a Desert Storm veteran. This was in 1990, 91. It's 20 years now. Now, the Secretary of the VA, Undersecretary of the VA, Tom Murphy, visited the governor and I about 3 weeks ago and mentioned that we should anticipate to be seeing more patients from the Gulf War within 15, 25, 50 years from now. My position on that is I should not wait to take action. I should anticipate and start thinking of what we need to do so that when these people return, because we don't need to wait 15, 25 years from now, it's happening now. They're out there getting injured, they're out there sacrificing. When they come back home, I need to be prepared to deal with their traumatic stresses and issues that they endured while they were deployed. And fourth, but not least, the drug epidemic on Guam is a serious stuff. And I am determined to suppress many of this drug problem that's happening. I was the former director for the Department of Corrections, and I could see the damage that the drug epidemic had done to families and kids, and they do not deserve that. And I'm
Yes.
going to go forward with that.
All right, and I think that's all the time we have. Thank you so much. We're going to take a quick break. Welcome back to another episode of Coffee with the Candidates. Joining us now is Republican incumbent senatorial candidate Frank Bloss Jr. Frank, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
Okay, let's get right into it. Number one, why are you running for office?
I love my island, and I've spent basically all of my adult life, first off, protecting and caring for people, for our community, our families, our children. I was a police officer. I was the Homeland Security Advisor. I was once the president of the Make-A-Wish Foundation and the president of the Guam War Survivors Memorial Foundation. And legislation that I've introduced was geared towards protecting not only the livelihood and the safety of our families and our children, but it's also protecting the future of our community. And I want to continue that effort.
Okay, that's fair. Let's move on to current events, senatorial pay raises. Can you give us your opinion on the somewhat controversial senatorial pay raise?
Well, yes, that's been a controversy, and I believe that as I've stated throughout the session, there are processes that need to occur and that we have to follow. And of course, my background in law enforcement, I'm process oriented. And when I'm not comfortable with the process, everything else after that just doesn't make me feel comfortable at all either. So while that subject may continue to be something to consider in the next term, and maybe I will consider that as well. In this term, it was the processes that it wasn't the subject, but the process of which it went through that I had a problem with.
And do you think that people should be given the opportunity to vote or to repeal the current salary by means of a plebiscite?
You know, we got to remember, first off, the legislature is representation of the community, and the community, though, has an opportunity to be able to provide input in a number of different ways, to include setting up the parameters and the standards by which the legislature would function and what they're going to get paid. And I'm not going to stand in the way of community involvement.
Okay, now let's talk on the subject of medicinal or recreational marijuana. First, medicinal. Would you be for or against the implementation of medicinal
Okay,
marijuana?
medicinal. Let me preface both actually the discussions and both questions with this. I was a 13-year member of the police department, and when I left the police department, I left as the officer in charge of the Special Investigations Section, the Narcotics Unit. I was also the task force supervisor with the Drug Enforcement Administration Task Force. That said, when I left the police department, I went and I got certification as a National Prevention Specialist in the area of drug abuse and drug addiction. So I've seen both sides. I've seen the violence and the crime associated with drug use, and as well as I've seen in areas where the drugs used, in this particular case, marijuana used as an alternative for pain medication, how beneficial it is. Now that's said, for medicinal purposes, I'm for it. Okay, I do believe that there is the ability, the opportunity to be able to do this, provided that legislation that is passed is within the parameters and within the bounds of what the community and what the public had wanted as they had voted for in the referendum. Okay? With regard to recreational, I'm not for it. I'm not for it. I'm totally against that.
If you could give guidelines, if you're totally against it, you wouldn't give any guidelines for drawing up recreational?
I believe we've got enough problems with the drugs that we do have already legalized. I think compounding it by adding another one doesn't make matters any better. I see the value in its medicinal purposes. I don't see the value in the community for its recreational purpose.
If you could write guidelines for medicinal marijuana, what would they be?
Well, I would like to see that the drug, marijuana, is used for those individuals who have no other means or alternative to be able to take care of the pain that they're suffering, and that the pain is related to, trying to relieve that pain so that they're able to live the rest of their life in dignity, and in some cases pass on without so much pain and with dignity.
Okay, thank you for sharing.
No problem.
Let's switch subjects now to
Can I drink some coffee?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah, sure.
no problem.
Let's
Okay.
switch subjects to education. With the current status of the education here on Guam, what is your list of priorities?
I am the husband of a teacher. Okay, my beautiful wife is a 5th grade teacher at Atacama Elementary. So every day I hear, what goes on, not just in their classroom, but in the school and within the system. And so I see that there's many changes that are occurring, actually, that many other people don't know about that's occurring within the system. I'm just hoping that we go with a system that basically provides the basic and the proper education for our children. When you're talking about my role as a legislator with regard to education, I'd like to see first off that the monies that we can afford to provide to them goes into the classrooms. Okay? My wife and her colleagues many times have had to go and use their own money to be able to buy supplies, just the basic of the supplies for children. And they've also used their money to be able to buy materials to expand and enhance the learning experience for the kids. And so I'd like to make sure that when we do this, that the money doesn't get bogged in bureaucratic red tape and, try to manage the money. Give it down to where it's needed most. to providing the supplies and the materials to the kids.
Okay, now moving on to the subject of deportation. What is your stand on the deportation of convicts by the current administration?
Well, I support the process. The idea. I just, and I'm glad to see that there is dialogue and communication with the U.S. Attorney, our attorneys, and with ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Whether it be deportation of immigrants from the FAS, from the Free Associated States, or deportation of individuals who come from other countries other than this. My whole thing is, again, what is right and how do we best protect our community here? And if the deportation means that, we take this element away from our community, I'm for it.
So do you think those convicts should finish their sentence first?
Well, part of this whole process is they're supposed to be using that time to get rehabilitated. And in many of the cases, there was no effort on their part to want to do this. And so what then becomes if they're done with their sentence and they don't get rehabilitated, and then we put them back out into the community? Then what happens? I think that first of all, they wanted to be here and they can no longer be here, so deport them back.
And I'm not sure if you mentioned this, but just to clarify, do you agree with the AG's office that the governor has no deportation powers? That's
a discussion that has to go on between them. Okay. Obviously, there seems to be some concern and some issue with that, and I know my role as in the legislature. And so I'd like to keep that discussion over there.
Okay. And is there anything else you'd like to share with the audience about your platform?
Well, what I'd like to do is first off, I'm humbled that you've given me that opportunity to come back into the legislature. I did take some time off after my unsuccessful bid to run for Congress. And in this legislature, I hope that I've proven that I continue to watch over and to protect our children and those that are most vulnerable. Obviously, in one of the last bills that I had passed into law, Bill 326, which helped to ensure that victims of child sexual abuse had the opportunity to be whole, and also a bill that made it a crime for an individual to harm an unborn child. That my area again is to continue to protect our community and our children and those that are most vulnerable, and I will continue to do that if allowed to be in the 34th Guam legislature as well.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. It's great coffee.
Yeah, it's good coffee. Well, thank you so much, Frank, for sharing your platform with us. And that concludes this episode in the series of Coffee with the Candidates. We'd like to thank the Leo Palace Resort, which is the home of the Coffee with the Candidates, and all our sponsors. And don't forget to vote this January.